Hi, welcome to Imaginary Fiberglass's imaginary world of exotic kit cars. I'm Carl Guichot, the engineer here at Imaginary Fiberglass. I'll be leading you through this instructional video to aid you in building the car. The tape will go by a step-by-step process, starting from when you have first received your car from either the dealer or from the junkyard, wherever you have purchased your car. It'll then go to how to stretch the chassis, on to installing the body panels, and on to completing the car, such as installing turn signals, grills, pop-up headlights, painting, and doing the interior. I'd like to first ask that you make many backups of this tape, say 2, just in case something happens to this tape. I'd also like you to zero the counter on your VCR to 0. Upon viewing this tape, I'd like you to write down the count numbers as you get to key locations in the tape and are explaining certain processes. This will aid you in future steps, such as when you get to maybe the installation of turn signals. You will be able to go exactly to that counter location as opposed to viewing and looking through the entire tape. I'd like to again say thank you for purchasing your kit from Imaginary Fiberglass, and I hope that your car is as enjoyable to you as it is for us to produce the kit. Let's begin the video. Thank you. Hello once again. Well, this is a car that's getting ready to head off to Taiwan, so we kind of have to talk about it quickly so the mechanics can get back on it and finish it all off before she leaves out of here on the boat. I'd like to go over some of the brief steps that you're going to go through to build your car. First, after you buy the Fiero, of course you're going to remove all the body panels. You're going to want to stretch it. We prefer that you stretch the car, welding the steel re-embracing between the door jambs and any other steel that you can before you go ahead and cut off the roof. That also includes adding a subframe. If you purchase a subframe from us, we suggest that you weld it underneath the chassis before you cut the roof. Afterwards, you're going to cut the roof and then install your body. One thing that's going to aid you in aligning your body is if you have already purchased your rims and tires. By bolting on your rims and tires, and you are assuring that your suspension is properly fit. If the car had been in an accident, such as having a rear quarter panel hit and then damaging the A-arm or the rear suspension or the front suspension, you want to take care of all these matters before you do any stretching, any cutting on the car whatsoever. Make sure that all the suspension is properly adjusted, that the car is sitting as level as it should be. If you feel like you need to change all the shock absorbers, change them prior to doing any of the work. This will ensure that you have a proper stance on the car. As I said before, it is easier to install the body with the wheels and tires on, but not completely necessary. If you don't have the wheels and tires, just take your time. Use a ruler and give it your best judgment as to the proper location of everything. After you have a friend help you and assist you in raising the body and placing it on top of the Fiero, move it, block it up, chalk it, wherever you need to ensure that it's where you want it to go. Once you're assured that you have it in the right proper place, then you want to start attaching and welding down the braces which hold it to the chassis. If you have fabricated a window channel, like for such as the 500 style Countach replica, it is best to install the rear window channel, which will give you the installation of the glass. Install it on the back windowsill or along the firewall, and then weld it to the main cross member within the fiberglass along the rear of the roof. On the anniversary, you want to take the 2 square piece posts, the 1 inch by 1 inch square tubing, weld them to the top of the sill of the firewall, and then rest the body on top of those points. That'll give you the location of the height of the roof with respect to the interior of the car. Then you can move forward to the front of the car and place your square braces underneath the fenders as you see fit to give it the right adjustment. Grind the square tubing down to make for proper fit until you have everything right. Remove all the fiberglass from the steel bars which are inlaid underneath the body, and then weld the square tubes to the inlaid steel. We hope that all the instructions that we're about to show you on building your car will aid you in the building of your car. Once again, if you have any problems with anything during the process, we ask you to call us free of charge to talk to us, and we will try and help you through it. We want you to have easy going of building this car. So we're here to help. If you do not feel that you can stretch the chassis on your own, please ask for assistance, either through us verbally on the phone, or by going to a local body shop or a limousine shop who always stretch cars. Consult with them first on proper technique, or ask them if they would have someone who can assist you at a small nominal charge. These people in the body shop world make anywhere from $25 to $30 an hour. So to pay for someone to come over for 3 hours to assist you and point out key points of how to do something is not as expensive as if you had done it wrong and have to go back and change it. You can also go out and hire a welder if you're not sure how to weld or have never even learned. Hiring a welder will run you about $30 to $40 an hour. Most welders can come with the truck with a MIG welder on the tailgate and can do all the weld. All you have to do is pre-cut the chassis, level out the chassis in the proper places that you want it, and make sure that everything will fit up nice and easily. Then you can assist the gentleman in welding up the plates to the chassis. It'll approximately take him 4 to 5 hours to weld up the entire stretch and other plates that you'll need to weld on the chassis. Once again, we hope that this instructional video will help you through the fabrication of your car. And if there are any problems, please call us. Thank you. Welcome to the second section of the instruction video. Here we're going to start with the actual purchasing of your car, either in a wrecked form or in a brand new form. And then we're going to proceed to show you what body panels need to be removed, what sheet metal pieces need to be removed, and what cuts need to be made to the chassis prior to wanting to install the body panels. This particular car is going to be turned into a Lamborghini Countach due to its severity of its damaging. This is quite a severe damage for any kind of car that you would want to use for a Fiero, because this section of the car would not be able to be straightened out in good enough form to be able to easily bolt on the body panels and assure a straight body. That's why we recommend that you try and find a car that had very minimal damage, possibly to a door, where you can just replace the door, or to the front end in such a fashion that it was mostly body damage that had occurred and not actual structural damage to the chassis. One of the first things you'll do when you get your chassis, besides gawk at it, realize that you've started to build your car of your dreams, is to start to remove all the body panels. The body panels are held on with bolts throughout the series along the front fenders, the bumper section. The roof section is held on with not only just bolts in the back and the front, but also is glued down to the top of the roof. So some prying will have to occur to get the body panels to come off of the roof. Remove all the body panels in the rear, little quarters, the rockers, all the body work back through here. Rear quarters, which continues to wrap around through the back through this piece. Remove and discard the grills off of the Fiero. Remove this piece of tin. Not any longer needed. Leave your headlight, your rear tail light bulbs and all dangling, as you will splice into these wires later on. Later on, as you'll see in the car, a coupe inside, you're going to have to trim some of the metal here on the rear bumper brackets. You have now, at this point, unbolted your rear bumper assembly, and you will have to trim off some of this metal so that the rear valance of the car fits properly. You might also at this time wish to go ahead and cut off the rear exhaust. Cut as far back as you can, about halfway through the bend. What you'll do later on is add a series of Mazda tips, your exhaust stacks coming out of the car, you can have that done in a muffler shop later on after you've assembled your body. It'll make it for a much easier installation and you know which way you want to route your pipes. This car was also hit in the rear. If you had a car where it was hit in the rear, it's a lot easier to work with because you can straighten out the trunk area by pounding it out from the inside. Now we move over here to the fuel door. Next you want to remove and save your fuel door system. The fuel door is released through the mechanism above the driver's head seat. You can do it by moving the cap, removing the screws that hold in the exterior door. There's one Phillips head screw which holds in the actual locking mechanism itself. Then there are a series of hex head screws which hold in this plastic casing to the back underside. You want to remove the metal pieces which are underneath, which have come along, which are part of the metal necking system of the fuel system. There's one thing that you're going to have to save from this body panel. Save this body panel, and then later on you're going to have to make a cut similar to this and save the piece of fiberglass associated with it. This will aid you in bolting the whole assembly back together again on your kit. Again, remove all the rear windows, all of the side rear windows, the side quarter panels, and the fascia pieces which run along your door jambs. Some people will leave these in and merely just cut them here and here. You can do that and have them recovered, or you can just remove them completely and paint the area flat black. There is, however, a piece of metal tin underneath this which needs to be removed. It is held down by giant pop rivets. Just drill out the pop rivets with a drill and you can remove the piece of tin. Then paint the area and dress it up. Here we're going to explain the cuts that need to be made to the chassis, the stretching of the chassis, the welding in of the pieces, and the final bolting up of the sections. One thing you'll have to go out and probably purchase either by renting or buying is the Sawzall. This is a Milwaukee Sawzall. They accept blades of anywhere from 3 inches to 7 to 10 to 12 inches long. This is what you will use to make the cuts on the chassis. First thing you should probably also get is a piece of chalk. A piece of chalk or a pencil for more accurate measuring. Cover the area with a piece of chalk and then you can scribe it with the pencil and make measurements a lot more accurate. You're also going to need a tape measure. Get one that's fairly good and fairly accurate. You can be off by as much as up to a 1/16 of an inch, but you want to do as best of a job as you possibly can. First thing you want to do is reference the instruction manual that you have. Make the cuts, mark the cuts on the metal with the chalk and the pencil. Recheck all your measurements and make sure that the marks are in the right spot. After you've made all your marks with your pencil and your chalk, and you're sure that you know where you're going to cut, then you want to make the cut. You take the Sawzall with a long enough blade and just simply cut through the chassis. But first you want to go ahead and jack the chassis up so it doesn't fall apart into 2 pieces and you damage anything. One other thing that you might want to do at this point, if you haven't done it in the previous section, is make sure that all the fuel has been drained out of the fuel tank prior to welding. This is to assure that nothing actually happens and you blow yourself up. Okay. As far as jacking up the car, one of 2 choices. You can use a hydraulic jack, either the straight stand-up alone kind or the regular floor jack that you find at Sears and almost every other automotive parts store. Or you can use a scissors type of jack, the kind that you actually manually have to crank or that you actually use as a linear type of scissors jack. We prefer to use a scissors type of jack or a screw jack. You can get much more accurate measurements and tweaking the chassis into position with that. A hydraulic jack, you'll end up passing up the point, trying to bleed it. You'll be off by a larger error than you probably want to. So get and borrow as many scissors jacks from your friends as you can. Jack up and hold up the main station of the car forward of the cuts. And also jack up and hold the rear frame after the cut so that nothing's going to fall after you finish your cut. Wear goggles of course, and some gloves if you have them preferably in case the blade breaks. Make your vertical cut straight through and follow your line as close as you possibly can. It's not too critical if you wander a 1/16 of an inch. After you've made your cut and your car is now in two pieces, you're going to want to spread your chassis apart. This you're going to need some friends, at least 2 more people. Be careful because you can end up dropping or rotating the rear end of the chassis. Leave the front end of the chassis where it is on the jacks. By letting down on the pressure on the jacks, you can slowly roll back the rear end of the suspension. Then this is where your tape measure comes into play. And it's most crucial that you make all your measurements as accurately as you possibly can. As you can see in the instruction manual itself,
Hello. The voice track has been deleted from this small portion of the tape deliberately. What you are going to measure is a 5-inch distance between the forward and aft sections of the chassis. The 2 halves of the chassis are level with respect to each other. Therefore, take measurements with respect to the ground. We are sorry for any inconveniences.
to make your measurements, not only do you measure here and between the bottom sections of the cuts, but you also want to take a measurement between the tops of the shock strut and this inside corner of the chassis. On this particular car, it's 53 inches exactly, and it's the same in either direction. Make all your measurements once, twice, and 3 times, and make sure that you're right. It's going to take a lot of tweaking with the jacks before you get the whole thing set up right. The entire stretching of the chassis might take you 2 days, but you'll be assured that you've done it right. After you've made your first set of measurements, you can go ahead and take your inner plates first and tack weld those in. Clamp them into place, make another set of measurements, and make sure nothing is moved. Tack weld your inner plates in, plates number 1, on both sides. Then you next want to move on to plate number 2, the outside plates. You can go ahead, after making another set of measurements, tack weld those in. After you've got those tacked in, you can move on to what we're going to do, which is not visible in this car, but you should do it. You're going to drill a series of holes through both plates and through the suspension pieces that you have cut. Between these holes, you're going to run a bolt, 3/8 inch diameter, and place a shank inside so that when on tightening the bolt, you don't compress the plates and crimp them. We'll cover that more in the instruction manual, as you will see. After you've made your tack welds on those pieces, make all your measurements and make sure that everything is actually where you want it to be and you're finished. Then go on and you want to finish those welds. You want to weld all the vertical seams, you want to weld all the horizontal seams and weld those plates in perfectly. Take heed and use a MIG welder as opposed to a stick type of weld. The stick welders tend to burn through the metal of the chassis, the Fiero. You're using a heavier plate up to 1/4 inch on the convertible, and it's harder to adjust the stick welder. If you are an accomplished welder or a licensed welder, we recommend that you go out and hire a welder. It is not as expensive as you might think. Average welder makes about $20 an hour wherever he works, and that's usually a large corporation. Therefore, you can easily go out and hire a welder for $50 an hour who is licensed and has been working for many years to come over on the weekend. So if you're not an experienced welder and you're not licensed, we would prefer you that you go out and hire one. It won't take him but maybe an hour to weld in at one plate. You can leave for that day and you can bring him back when you're ready for the rest of the weld. After welding in the bottom plates and tack welding in the inner plates on the top, you now want to move to the point where you drill the holes, run your bolts through with your shanks. Do it now because you still have access to the inside of the chassis before you put the tops and bottom plates on both members. Once you've finished running the bolts through, then you want to prepare the top plates and the bottom plates for each piece. Go ahead and bevel the pieces of metal on the edges so that the welding will dig deeper into the metal. Tack weld in your plate, make another measurement, everything should be stiff enough to where it's fine now, but make a measurement anyway in case. It's much easier to cut right now and remove the pieces than it would be to do it at a later time. Tack weld in your tops and bottoms, and then weld them fully. Here we have some close-up shots of this stretch section. Notice the completed welds. Note where the rear subframe has been rebolted to the back inside plate. All of the welds are along the inseams and the top plate, welding along the back seam. The top plates. Now, one thing that is not shown here is the bolts. The bolts that you want to run will be through here, through here, through here, and then through here. Make sure that you use a good sized shank, slightly larger than the bolt, to assure that there will be no pinching between the material when you torque down on the bolts. This steel member is one which will be covered in later shots, but you will not be able to see it because of when the body panels are covered. It is welded to the chassis. It can be welded anywhere along the chassis in any section of the wheel well, and comes out and gets bolted to the wheel well piece of the outer skin. This gives a little rigidity to the fiberglass panel so it doesn't move in and out. Also note here the disconnected radiator hose. One of the things that will have to be disconnected before you can stretch the car is the radiator hoses on both sides, both incoming and outcoming. After you have disconnected them and you have stretched the car apart, all you need to do is to make one simple cut and then extend all the way back as you would with the normal rubber type of radiator hose. The other side is done in the exact same manner. Clutch cabling, fuel lines, and other such lines do not have to be cut. They are left alone. Here we see a unique installation of the wiper motor. Note how they have removed the wiper motor from the car, turned it on its side so that the control arm is sticking up, fabricated a plate and assorted bracketry, and then welded the bracketry to the chassis. The plate and motor are able to be bolted on, unbolted, and removed from the car if need be. You always want to try and make everything unboltable or removable in some fashion so that you can remove it from either maintenance or replacement. A control arm is then easily fabricated, which will connect the motor swing arm to the bracketry associated with the wiper arm itself, which is attached to these three fastener holes and one centering hole. One method for installing the fuel cap and fuel fill hose. Note, like on a real Countach, a hole has been drilled into the back side of a panel that has been fabricated in fiberglass to the inside of the NACA air scoop on the driver's side. Simply cut the hole big enough for the original flange which you removed from the Fiero, bolt on the flange to the back side of this panel, and put your filler cap on from this side. Here we see a different application of the fuel fill section. Taking and removing the original door off of the Fiero, the associated body panel area around that fuel fill area, the body panel cap, the fuel fill cap, the wiring mechanisms, the cable, and assorted nuts and bolts. You can reinstall all the above onto the side of the car on the driver's side, and then run a flexible fuel-proof hose over to the already existing steel fuel fill inlet. Here we are looking at the inside of the rear deck lid. This is one of the applications of applying the interior mesh grilling.
Note how bolts have been recessed within the grooves, Bondo or fiberglass inside the grooves, thus leaving the thread sticking out so that you can merely bolt on the mesh. Makes it easy for removal and easy for installation. Do all of this after you've done the bodywork and before you have painted. That way you don't run the risk of harming the paint while fiberglassing bolts inside the slides. Use the same method for the side scoops. Here's one of the installations on a rear quarter glass. You're supplied with the glass in the kit, and then the frame is made out of small L channel. You can find this most commonly in almost any hardware store. Merely miter cut the corners and either braze or weld them together. The thinner the material, the easier it is to bend, to contort to the shape of the glass. Attach the frame to the glass using black silicone sealant and attach the entire quarter glass assembly to the car with DuPont window sealant. The same method for fabricating the rear quarter glass trim is used on the forward windshield. This is 1/2 by 1/8 inch L bracket material, tin. You can also find the same material made out of aluminum and or steel. Get a fairly soft material which is easy malleable and workable. Other sizes commonly used are 1 inch by 1/8. The mesh for the side NACA air scoops is of a different pattern, triangular pattern instead of the single hole drilled out pattern that used on the rear scoops. Cut the material to fit inside the contour of the outer body surface. Then bend a 90-degree angle going back along the side of the car, along the chassis, and then merely screw it to the side of the car. Here we see an installation of the side markers. Yellows go in the front, reds go to the rear. We suggest that you install these prior to doing any of the painting, right after you've done the body work. This will ensure that when you hole saw out the center section for the bulb clearance, that you do not destroy or cause a crack to propagate throughout the side of the body. Drill the required hole for the bulb clearance in the center, place on the lens, drill the appropriate holes for sheet metal screws to catch into the fiberglass and hold the cover on. Here we see the installation of the forward turn signals. Actual Lamborghini front turn signals have been purchased. The holes in the back side of the bucket have been drilled for the bulbs to intrude. The lens cover has been attached. And then the plexiglass lens cover for the entire turn signal assembly has been installed on the outside. Flush mounting machine head screws
have been installed to hold it down. And afterwards, the underside of the plexiglass and its outer edge are to be painted with flat black paint. Some people prefer to paint the trim on the outside. Some people prefer to paint it on the inside. The mount is all up to you. Here's the installation of the forward fog lights. Bracketry has not been developed for installing the fog lights, as across the country different types of bracketry, different types of fog lights are available. Please try and find one in an appropriate size that will fit. What you see here are small, low-beam square headlights, pointed down so that they cause no trouble with anyone else's visibility. The bracketry is up to you as to how to install it. Here is the installation of the front trunk latch. Note, an L bracket piece of plate has been bolted inside the rain gutters. The latch release mechanism, which has been removed from the Fiero, keeping the cabling intact and still attached to the handle with inside the car, has been bolted on to the backside of the plate with the same existing hardware that was used to remove it. The lock mechanism is now fully adjustable in the up-down direction. Remember, when welding in the fiberglass catch bar on the inside of the deck lid, you want to attempt to center it with respect to left-right of the hood and approximately forward-back so that it will catch into where you plan on locating the lock mechanism. After fiberglassing in the post into the deck lid, then install the bracketry and lock mechanism release. Here we see a slightly different approach from that called out in the blueprints. The square box tubing, which was to be originally welded to the place where you have cut the chassis on the front members, has been instead welded to a plate, which is being bolted to another plate which was welded to the original chassis. This makes it so the entire assembly is easily unbolted and removed if access is deemed fit. The entire radiator bracketry is also in a way constructed so that it is unboltable. On this particular car, our mechanic had to do a little something different. The gentleman who ordered this car instead wished to have both headlight motors installed instead of one, as we show in the blueprints. Therefore, each motor was mounted to the side main cross members of the subframe, and an individual mechanism was run up to the headlights buckets. Either method is easy to install if you understand the principles behind what you're trying to achieve. Remember, the motor is situated in such a way as to, when it begins to rotate, it will not stop until something of greater force stops it from rotating. Fiero designed it so that the motor runs in one direction until a metal stop runs into a fixed piece of metal. The motor is then electronically shut down and is waiting for its next electrical command to return in the other direction, hit another metal stop, and stop in that direction. The same principles must be governed when you're installing the motor in a separate situation such as this. If you do not maintain the metal housing buckets which come along with the motors, which cause the motor's arms to stop in both directions, then you must fabricate your own stops so that when the arm swings around, it causes it to stop, as opposed to letting the headlight motor pod continue to rotate all the way up and back into the car. The single motor installation, which would normally be found right behind the bracketry which holds onto the front deck lid latch, in most cases seems to be easier to install. Here we see the installation of the rear window area where the body meets up with the chassis. After placing the body down on top of the chassis and locating it in the proper location, this is the attachment point for the rear window. 1 inch by 1 inch square box steel tubing is welded to the window frame area where the original window came out of, and then welded to the steel inside the chassis, the body already. The area between where the original edge of the window was on the original Fiero and where it is now going to be located on the new Countach replica body is boxed in with steel. Tack weld everything into place, assure a proper fit, and then finish off all your welds. After welding in, seal everything with silicone seal. Make sure to get a good seal so that no exhaust fumes will propagate up into the cockpit. Here we can see one of the other supports which attaches the body to the chassis. Once again, it's 1 inch by 1 inch square steel tubing, welded to the chassis at the edge of the trunk lip, and welded to the steel within the body. Other points of contact are along the entire back side of the trunk. To fabricate up the new trunk area, make the needed cuts on the back side of the old trunk, as shown in the blueprint, and then box in the section in the back with 1 inch by 1 inch square steel tubing. This 1 inch by 1 inch square steel tubing will also give you support for the plate, which will install the original electrical solenoid lock release mechanism that you removed off of the original Fiero. In this application, a spring was added to ensure that once the release mechanism is employed, the hatch pops up. Other people have used methods such as relocating the shock struts on the deck lid so that they are stronger, so that as soon as the release mechanism button is hit, the deck lid springs up into a full up position. This could become a hassle if driving down the road and the button was hit, so please take care. Other people have done such thing as making the deck lid sit so tight on the rubber seal that that force alone merely pops the deck lid up approximately a ½ inch after the electrical solenoid lock was installed. Since the rear hatch deck lid lock is electric, you could run into the problem that if your battery is run down and you're out in nowhere, you can't get into the car to recharge the battery, which is located underneath the rear deck lid. Therefore, we suggest that you take the lock mechanism apart, removing the solenoid itself from the lock. Looking at the mechanism, you can see clearly that by wrapping a piece of wire around the lock mechanism, passing it through the bottom of the lock housing and out to the exterior part of the car and forming a small loop, you can easily tuck this up underneath the car so that no one will see it. If the need arises, you can slip a pencil between the loop, inside the loop on the exterior part of the car, merely pulling down to release the lock mechanism manually. Your deck lid will then release, you can get to your battery and charge the battery up and jump start the car. Next, you need the sheet metal in the boxed in area for the trunk. Using small gauge tin or aluminum, cut, bolt, or weld in the material to the 1 inch by 1 inch square tubing. This forms the new trunk area. Later time it can all be carpeted in. Here are some other attachment points. As you can see, 1 inch by 1 inch square steel tubing had tabs welded to it. The tabs are then bolted onto the chassis. The square tubing is then welded to a steel plate, which is then fiberglass to the inside of the body. This gives the side of the body some strength on the lateral motion. The entire area can then be covered with just regular butyl rubber. This will close out the area so that foreign particles coming in from the wheel well or foreign particles coming in through the scoop do not drop down the side of the car, and it gives a much better appearance. Here we see the installation of the rear deck lid latch hook catch member. As you can see, it's welded to the steel plates which are inlaid within the body. These plates, approximately 1/2 inch strapping material by 1/8 inch thick, are inlaid within the door in fiberglass. The catch hook lock is to not be welded to this until after the installation of the lock mechanism down here. Weld the plate to the square inch steel bar laminated into the body. Approximately locate the lock mechanism. Mark your holes and drill some pilot holes. Attach the lock mechanism to the pilot hole with small sheet metal screws. Then, partially closing the deck lid and holding in place the lock catch hook, mark the section on the door as to where you should weld. Through closing the deck lid and approximately lining this up with where you plan on putting the solenoid release mechanism, you can get a better estimate as to where this should be welded. Weld this into place and then return to working on the solenoid release mechanism. Repeatedly, through up and down motions with the deck lid, attempt to latch the deck lid. If you have to move side to side, remove the deck lid lock solenoid mechanism, drill new pilot holes to the left or right side, and attach with small sheet metal screws until you have found the right side-to-side location. Once the hook has been lined up with the center of the release solenoid, drill your holes and drill slots. You can make a slot in the plate in the up-down direction by drilling a series of holes and then filing out the inside to create a slot for adjustment. The solenoid release mechanism can then be adjusted in the up-down direction to compensate for the height of the hook. The order which you want to take for installing these pieces is as follows. Measure from the back of the deck lid forward approximately 10 inches. Clear off the fiberglass to expose the metal within the door. Weld an L bracket to the metal. Install the ball stud and the gas strut. Open the deck lid to the point where you feel that you want the deck lid to open to its maximum range. Letting the shock strut hang loosely, mark the location as to where you want to attach it on the chassis, and then fabricate the appropriate bracketry to hold it there. Do the same for the other side, taking into compensation as to what you've done for this side. Here we see the installation of an intercooler. This intercooler is for the turbocharger, which has been added to this car as an option. The air filter has been mounted auxiliary to the back side of the left-hand air scoop. The exhaust has been modified to coincide with the turbocharger. and all for a moderate price. Okay, now let's talk about the area in the door jamb where you've reinforced with the steel. The two plates and square tubing that go between the rear of the door jamb and the front section are already welded in place underneath this car. The two plates and the square tubing act as a stiffener between the front and rear of the door jamb. Install these pieces before you do any roof cutting. After you've welded in these plates and the body has been attached to the chassis in a temporary fashion, mark where you wish to weld the plate, which will give support for the top hinge of the door, support for the L brackets, which will hold on the gas struts, which will support the door in the upper position, and then eventually weld it into the chassis along the back side. And you can continue the plate further down and weld it to the two plates and square box steel tubing that connects the front door jamb to the back door jamb. On this particular car, an extra support was added from the back of the plate to the chassis. One piece of 3/4 by 3/4 or 1/2 by 1/2 square steel tubing will do the trick. Afterwards, weld an L bracket off the side of the plate that is now underneath the front door jamb of the body replica. Attach a ball stud and a gas strut going up to the door. On the back side of the door jamb, you can do the attachment of the hook mechanism for catching of the latch inside the door in one of two fashions. A plate with the hook's rod coming out of it can be bolted on from this side of the body, or in this method, a hole drilled, which will allow the person to install the bolt On this car, sheet metal has also been added to cover the original chassis section and to bridge the gap between where the plates were welded and where you would like the interior to begin. One-inch by 1-inch square steel tubing can be used to form supports on the inside to hold the sheet metal. Here you can see where the dash cuts were made to separate the interior dash now from where the original upholstered black dash was on the Fiero. This exposes the existing air boxes, which can be fiberglassed over. The holes on the front of the airbox will form the inlets for the fresh air coming from underneath the trunk deck lid. Here we see the inside of one of the doors of the 25th replica. You can see where the gas strut attaches to the square steel tubing. The support going down to the bottom of the door gives rigidity. The square steel bars brought all the way across the door itself and bolted to the back side of the fiberglass of the door. A release mechanism can be made in two possible ways. Here we see that one of the original handles out of the Fiero with some handmade bracketry holding it in place with a cable going back to the original lock. Here we can see the installation of one of the wheel wells. Note the black plastic, part of the hardware store. It's attached to the end lip of the wheel well and to the back side of the chassis. Plastic is easily malleable with just a normal heat gun or by holding it over the stove. Let it soften, bend it, and then let it cool. Here's the installation of the rear grills. These grills were removed from the back engine compartment of the Fiero. The two steel bars that you welded to the square tubing that's inlaid within the fiberglass of the body are giving support for the front of the grill. The back end of the grill has the two holes already built on the grill, and therefore that's why you fiberglassed in a wooden block along the rear section. Merely screw the back end of the grill up into the wood block. Note the location of the wing with respect to the deck lid in the rear of the car. On this particular car, wing air dams on the ends were made out of 1/16 inch thick aluminum. Screws which hold it on to the end were countersunk, ground flat, and then merely filled with putty. Installation of the rear quarter glasses on the 5000 replica or on the anniversary replica is the same. Take the glass, make a piece of trim, and using DuPont window sealant, install it in the rear quarters. Trim around the windows can be bought at a local upholstery store. This particular type has a plastic beaded end which wraps around the lip. It has metal inserts within it that grab onto the fiberglass. To ensure that it stays on and to ensure that it gives a pretty good air seal and water seal, it was filled with silicone sealant and then screwed on with sheet metal screws into the fiberglass. The grills within the NACA air duct are installed in the same method as they are on the anniversary replica. The side grills on the Koenig replica spoiler were fabricated per the blueprints. Mesh grilling in the lower hole, same method of installation as the above NACA. See a completed turn signal cover plate and its turn signals. Etched lines were created by turning the plexiglass cover over, marking the positions of the lines, and then pulling a razor blade across it. Use a steel ruler as a guide for the razor blade. Note how the trim around the edge is merely painted and it is quite narrow. Do not make it too thick as this will look out of place. Note the installation of the forward grills and how the bolts continue all the way through to the bottom.
fog lights, and the grille meshing. Let's talk a little bit about gaps. Note here the distance between the front deck lid and the body itself. A fairly small and tight gap. They do not have to be this close. A 1/8 inch gap or 3/16 inch gap is minimum. If you look at a regular American car or a Japanese car, you'll see that the gaps are considerably larger, up to a 1/4 inch. For movable surfaces such as the headlight pods, the gap should be a little bit larger. On this particular car, they are very small, and this sometimes poses a problem with operation in the up and down direction, especially along the rear section. The pod has to clear the body immediately before it can rotate back. Therefore, in this particular car, the back of the pod had to be beveled so that it has minimum clearance upon rotation. On the doors, the gaps can be considerably larger. You want to make sure that the door will not rub against the body upon closure, as can be seen here. Paint is already beginning to chip away because the tolerancing was too close. Part about fitting the 5000's doors are along the back side. When installing your doors, position your doors, install your hinges, and upon closing, run a piece of paper along through the gap to ensure that nothing is binding on the inside. Here, within the driver's side knocker air scoop, is the hole for installing the lock mechanism. It's key release. When turning the key, you send an electrical impulse to the solenoids located within the door, which pull a wire which release the lock mechanism. The gas struts then force the door upward, and thus opening up the door. Some people buy an extra key and put it on the passenger side. We see the gas strut and hinge installation, 5000. Its rubber trim. A heat shield built as an option. Just merely fabricated out of tin and use standoff studs to bolt it on. The inside of this trunk was painted with spackle or splatter, gray and white, black mixed in, which gives a nice appearance and hides any of the imperfections in the fiberglass. Here you can see the approximate location point of the gas strut onto the chassis and the carpeting of the trunk. Rubber trim is also added to the aft section of the rear latch. Here we can see the installation of the rear turn signals. The red plexiglass as the outer trim, yellow turn, red brake, white backup. Note the installation of the mesh grilling on the back of this car. What this customer did was left the Fierro steel bumper on the back, cut it off, removed the tips, left the plastic nodules that were on it, fiberglassed over them, bonded over them, to give the appearance of these bumper cushions.
license plate fits uniquely right in between. On this particular car, the exhaust tips have not been added, but the Monza or ANSA exhaust tips that you've been supplied will come right up through here. Note the mistake made here in the front trunk area. The brake reservoir is resting up against the body. The body was installed too low. Leave at least a 1/4 inch gap between there. This one is still removable, but it is much harder to remove. Note the lock installation, wiper motor, release cabling running back over to the other side, and its plate, which holds all of this in place. This was fabricated by you, the builder, and on this particular car is unboltable and removable. The relocation of the washer bottle. Note how the front trunk area between where the original spare tire plastic ended and the front nose of the car has been sheet metaled in with one piece of sheet metal up and over the lip. It is removable to give access to the radiator and air conditioned refrigerant refill holes, and has then been carpeted over. Now let's talk about the interior. This interior is one of the more popular ones, tan on a red car. The seats were upholstered at an upholstery shop. The center console pieces can be either paint with flexible paint to color match the colors of the seats, or covered in upholstery, either vinyl or leather, to match the seats, as well as the rear headrest area. Some of the panels that you see here were fabricated in the shop by hand, and you need to do the same. As for if we made these panels in one-piece fashion and sold them to you, we cannot be assured as to how you place the body on the car, and therefore the panel would not fit properly. To fabricate a rear window piece, merely take a piece of press board, mark it as though you would wish to cover the entire back wall of the car, and cut out the section for the glass of the window. Take the piece of press board, and the upholstery shop will cover it in true fashion to match the rest of the car. As for the dash, it is a lot easier than it looks. The shape of the dash is dependent on how difficult you want the upholsterer to cover it. If your upholsterer is a talented person, he'll have no difficulty covering anything that you happen to bring him. This particular dash was wanted by the customer in this fashion, such that it starts all the way up where the windshield meets with the car and comes all the way back to the Fiero's module. Other dashes stop short, merely turn down over the lip or the face of the car, and are then covered in padding and then vinyl or leather as you prefer. This particular dash hasn't had its holes cut out for the air inlets yet, but it will. Some people prefer to use carpet on the door jamb area. There is a reason. Sliding in and out of the car will cause wear on either vinyl or leather, and will have to be eventually replaced. Almost any upholstery shop can do headliner material in any color to match what you need. This happened to be tan to match the seats in the interior. It also comes in black, blues, greens, yellows, any other color that you usually prefer. Here we see a different styled interior, custom made by the customer himself who was building this car. The center console was fabricated out of pieces of plywood and then fiberglassed over. Once trimmed and attached and then removed, it was covered with foam and material. All of this can be done at home by yourself, just as this person did it, without any major problems. Most upholstery shops are willing to help you to show you the techniques that they use to install all of this equipment. The headliner material, the black material on the roof, is easily installed with spray contact cement. We recommend that you use DuPont 80 or better spray contact cement, as it will withstand the high temperatures that your roof will see. The rear headliner piece is constructed in a similar manner as it is on the Anniversary. Merely cut a piece of wood, probably pressboard, to fit into the rear window section, coming down below the seats approximately 4 inches. Take this piece, have it covered in fabric. Additional panels, taking over from there and going down lower behind the seats, can be made in the same fashion. The side pieces here were fabricated by laying wax paper over the entire sides of the car, along the sheet metal and up over this door jamb area, and then laying matte cloth and resin over the top. When it hardened, the panel was removed, trimmed, and then smoothed out using Bondo or Mar glass. The panel is then covered in foam and material. For the door panels, take the doors, lay them on them sides on a table. Cut a piece of cardboard to cover the opening in the side of the door and lay it in place. Take matte cloth, wax the entire area with common car wax, or mold release wax if preferable, and then lay on 2 layers of fiberglassing cloth and resin. Let it dry and trim to fit. You can either cut the opening for the Countach styled hand door release mechanism, which is the cable running front to back to the lock mechanism. Or you can use the other method and just leave the panel flat that you've seen earlier for the 25th anniversary door using the Fierro release lock mechanism. Merely cut a hole within the panel for that to stick through. As you can see, the original Fierro map light was installed by fiberglassing blocks of wood to the insides of the roof and then merely screwing into the blocks of wood. The front end was sheet metal screwed into the steel reinforcement bar in the front of the window. Here we see that the front dash area, which was gray, and its module for the center for the. Here we see that the front dash area, all of the gray, has been painted now with a flexible paint put out by DuPont. If you bring a swatch of cloth from your interior material to the DuPont dealer nearest you, he can match the paint exactly. The center console piece for the air conditioning control panel and air conditioning ducts has been covered in the same material as the rest of the car. Here we see a different style dash. The dash was fabricated out of fiberglass, the same method as the side panels were, and the door panels. The area was covered with a piece of thin wood, either pressboard, particle board, or plywood, waxed all along the sides
anywhere you don't want the fiberglass resin to stay. And then matte cloth was laid over the top. Do all of these type of procedures before you even start on the bodywork. That way, you don't run the risk of damaging any of the bodywork or getting resin and fiberglass and cloth stuck to everything else. Take care not to get anything fiberglass and resin dripping down the front fascia plate of the dash, as it will not be removable. Therefore, cover everything else with wax paper. Remove the dash cluster instrument panel out of the car completely to make sure that you do not damage it. The panel was then smoothed using Bondo as level as possible, then covered with 1/2 inch thick foam and then the black vinyl, as you see here. The fiberglassing panel was made to lip over and cover up the seam that you had cut on the original dash. This is, we see the installation of a different steering wheel, its adapter, and a gear shift knob. The gear shift knob's boot was fabricated out of the same color material by making 4 triangular pieces and sewing them together. We thank you for your patronage, and we hope that we have suited you well in showing you how to build your car. We thank you again and wish you a good day.